that is the ocean still obscures so many mysteries. Life forms as alien as the faraway stars, clues to our own past, half remembered almost amidst the web of history. Silent beneath the sunlit sea, the stones themselves may speak of the secrets of another age, of fallen temples and forgotten lives in a land they called Atlantis. Since man first entered the oceans to unravel its mysteries, one secret remains for the most part elusive. Scant clues as to the existence and location of lost Atlantis remain hidden within the depths, as if held in a timeless trust by the myriad creatures of the sea. From time to time, these guardians of the ages allow our eyes to glimpse a tantalizing piece of the puzzle. But as sentinels of a mystery as old as man himself, they grant us merely a dim and shadowed view through the narrow portal of history. These faint and cryptic messages from our ancient past may be locked in the very stones of the seafloor. They may lead us along a barely discernible path laid out long ago beneath the silent sea. Here, the stones themselves may speak of a dream long held in the collective memory, of a golden age in the human story. Occasionally, the pieces of this puzzle, as vast as time, present a clue of promise, a hint as to the structures of the ancients, decipherable to a dedicated few who track the trackless way, and see the signs, the steps, the marks of men amidst the sunken, ruined order of nature, scattered out beneath the oceans of the world in seeming randomness and abandon. This journey of rediscovery takes us towards the very center of our Earth in an attempt to unravel the fabric of time itself, to probe and pull from the depths the ancestral messages that may remain. By utilizing every conventional tool and every innovative technology that modern men devise, this science, sent seeking like a silver eye in space, scans the broad reaching of the ocean realm. Faint fragments of this mystery lie strewn upon the ocean floor, from the Azores to the Amazon, and on across the Grand Bahama Bank, where evocative sand-blown patterns, like hieroglyphs, lead the searchers on, sometimes shifting by storm or tide to reveal the possibility of a long-ago civilization. Perhaps the workings of some forgotten race with the reputation of gods and the limitations of men. The challenge is the decoding of a message transmitted through myth and legend down through the ages, and so often obscured by the retelling of the tale, by the passage of time, or the force of the elements themselves. What has been sent down to us intact, like some returning craft launched so long ago, and which some believe exists and still remains above and below the waves, is a name. That name is Atlantis, fabled mother of empires and cradle of cultures. Her influence and power spread across the oceans of the world, but as men, with curiosity and conquest at heart, they spread out upon the earth and spawned the ancient cultures of the world. Those who subscribe to the theory of Atlantean expansion cite the mysterious megalithic structures of Europe as possible proof of contact. And it must be admitted that the similarities of culture and design, now separated by thousands of miles of open ocean, are, at the very least, striking and intriguing. To the west, the cultures of the Maya, Aztec, and Inca. To the east, the cultures of Egypt and India all pose unanswered questions as to their origin. If only the stones could speak, would they converse in a common language across the gulf of time and space? It is in the land of the pharaohs, Egypt, the crucible of civilization, that we find the first clear clues as to the existence, influence, and demise of Atlantis and its inhabitants. The Egyptians were the only people of antiquity who were well informed as to the history of Atlantis. 600 years before the birth of Christ, Solon, the great lawgiver of Athens, returned to Greece from a 10-year sojourn in Egypt. To the Egyptians, Greek civilization lacked continuity. They viewed the Greeks as children who had often lost their way, and apart from poetic myth, had no continuous record of previous millennia. Amongst Solon's newfound knowledge was a detailed history of the Atlantean age. His intention was to commit the tale to epic verse, but infirmity and death intervened. 200 years would pass before his descendant, Plato, one of the most profound thinkers and historians of the ancient world, would take up the task in his letters to Timaeus and Critias. What Plato recounted to his students and followers was not a fanciful yarn of gods, demons, miracles, and mysteries, but a reasonable history of a rich, cultured, and educated people who dwelt in a land called Atlantis, situated beyond the Pillars of Hercules, in what we now call the Atlantic Ocean. Though much of Plato's account deals with an attack by a large Atlantean invasionary force on the city-state of Athens, he continues on, in his own words, to describe in minute and splendid detail the continent, culture, and civilization of Atlantis, as it was more than 9,000 years before.
Now this island was larger than Libya and Asia together. Landward, the island presented a mountainous aspect, especially on that side of which looked seaward. Around the royal city stretched a level plain, likewise circled by mountains except on the coast. The Atlanteans built temples and palaces. Bridges directed the waters, which flowed in a triple circle around their ancient metropolis. The part which faced the sea was covered with villas, places for worship. There were outposts of commerce where merchants from all parts came to do their trading. In the middle of the city was the Temple of Poseidon, glittering with gold. At the entrance to the bridges were gates, surmounted by defending towers. These bridges were sufficiently high to permit the passage of large vessels. Each of the 2 zones of the city was filled with temples, shrines, groves, and gymnasiums. All around the city stood golden images of all the descendants of the Atlantean kings, together with many statues of royalty and private persons from foreign parts that were in subjection to the Atlantic island. This inner sanctum was fiercely protected by the soldiers of the Royal Guard. Atlantis itself was divided into zones of power, each overseen by a governor appointed by the royal family and responsible for directing the course of trade and contact with foreign lands. From the western outposts, missions of commerce and conversion spread out across the narrow seas to a jungle realm, rich in gold and peoples thirsting for knowledge of the world and the forces that shaped it. From their eastern settlements, the Atlanteans sent forth missionaries, scholars, and traders to explore the lands within the Pillars of Hercules that bound the inland sea, across the desert kingdoms and beyond to the valleys of the Indus and Ganges. For many centuries they did not lose sight of their majestic origins. Sincerity reigned in their heart. Moderation and prudence directed their conduct and dealings with foreign nations. They obeyed the laws and were religious adorers of the Atlantean gods, their ancestors. So long as they behaved in this manner, all was well with them. They were governed by the ordinances of the Atlantean rulers. Once in 6 years, they assembled to deliberate on public affairs, to examine all matters with pious attention, judging and condemning the wicked. But in the course of time, the vicissitudes of human affairs corrupted little by little their divine institutions. They hearkened to the prompting of rude ambition and sought to rule by violence. They commenced to study the arts of war, the ways of conquest and slavery, and nothing else. They began to comport themselves like the rest of the children of men and grew depraved. Then Zeus, king of the gods, beholding this race once so noble, resolved to punish it. He convoked a council of the gods in Olympus and addressed them as follows.
Here Plato's account ends, and it is believed that death interfered with its conclusion, just as death would now come to the continent and peoples of which he wrote. How exactly the demise of this once mighty realm occurred may never be known. There are those who speculate that she slipped beneath the waves in a single cataclysmic night, with the loss of more than 64 million lives. There are those who believe that within her final death throes, the true level of Atlantean development became terrifyingly clear. However the end came to fair Atlantis, we can be sure that in our own time, scant clues remain as to the existence and whereabouts of the remains of the 8th continent.
There are several reasons why I believe in the existence of Atlantis. They're put forward in some of these books which have made studies of Atlantis, such as Donnelly's book, Charles Berlitz's book, a Russian scientist named Zhirov, many wonderful collections of all the evidence which is available, which sort of points in a circumstantial way to the existence of Atlantis.
I believe that Atlantis did exist, and if I had adequate funds, I would start out with the Azores and the Canaries and off the mouth of the Amazon, the Ilha de Maranhão. But then I would go down with the Alvin down the mid-Atlantic ridge. We have a volcano there called Atlantis, dated 10,000 BC on the mid-Atlantic ridge. Those are the places that I would look.
I think it's important that we look for Atlantis, just as Schliemann would not have found Troy if he had not looked for it. Unless you're seeking, you will certainly not find Atlantis, and if we do, it would probably be the most important archaeological event in the world.
I think that the major task ahead of us is to look and see if we can find something, and the evidence will tell. It could be one of the most exciting discoveries of the 20th century.
The Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach dedicates a large amount of energy towards Atlantean studies. One of its scholars in this discipline is Dr. Doug Richards.
Atlantis is a legend that's been around with us for a long time, since several hundred years BC, when Plato, in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, first talked about Atlantis as being a continent beyond the Pillars of Hercules that had a battle with the Athenians. Between Plato and the 1800s, there wasn't an awful lot done in terms of speculation on Atlantis. But then Ignatius Donnelly, in about 1882, published the book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. And what Donnelly did was Donnelly compiled an enormous amount of material from different sciences and mythology to make the thesis that Atlantis had indeed existed and was the source of a lot of the world's civilization. Now, the reason that people are looking down in Bimini for Atlantis is because Edgar Cayce in the 1920s was giving psychic readings on a variety of topics and mentioned in one of the readings that Bimini, this tiny island off the coast of Florida, was the last remaining part above the waves of what was once a great continent, Atlantis. And in the succeeding 15 years, he mentioned Bimini in connection with Atlantis quite a few more times and dropped tantalizing hints about how one might go about finding it. For example, he said, if a geological survey were to be made in the Gulf Stream near Bimini, that much would be found.
The Bimini Group lie less than 50 miles from the Florida shore and consist of 2 main islands separated by a narrow channel. The population centers of Alice and Bailey towns cling to the sandy isthmus of North Bimini and have provided a safe and colorful haven for generations of boaters, deep-sea fishermen, and would-be adventurers. Among its more famous or infamous part-time residents was writer Ernest Hemingway, a regular at the island's Complete Angler Tavern. Somewhat more secluded and slow-paced, South Bimini, with resorts such as the Bimini Reef Club, caters almost exclusively to the new wave of undersea explorers. For some, the allure is simply that of a new adventure in a tropical paradise. For others, it's the opportunity to unravel one of the area's most enduring mysteries. It was from the shores of Bimini more than 2 decades ago that a previous generation of scuba diving enthusiasts commenced a search for clues which they hoped would ultimately correspond with and support Edgar Cayce's prophecy of Atlantis's rise. During the summer of 1968, ARE pilots Robert Brush and Trigg Adams were undertaking flyovers of the Bahamas in an attempt to find tangible proof of Edgar Cayce's predictions. The seafloor topography of the Bahama Banks is rife with evocative shapes and patterns, indistinct figures, shadowed footprints, and occasionally linear features. The various reports and sightings of the 2 pilots came to the attention of Miami-based archaeologist Dr. J. Manson Valentine, who was so intrigued by their observations that he embarked on a program of in-depth investigation so as to determine the likelihood of any of them being the remnants of man-made structures. On September 2nd of the same year, while searching for other reported sites off Bimini, Valentine found 2 anomalies half a mile off Paradise Point, North Bimini Island. Originally referred to as walls, the structures protruded roughly 3 feet above the seafloor and extended for 1,900 feet, 14 degrees off the beach line. Dr. Valentine saw an extensive pavement of rectangular and polygonal flat stones of varying sizes and thicknesses, obviously shaped and accurately aligned to form a convincingly man-made pattern. To the researchers, Cayce's prediction had been realized, and soon the world would learn of what we now refer to as the Bimini Road. The stones had evidently lain submerged for a very long time. The edges of the largest blocks had been rounded off, giving them a domed appearance, like great loaves of bread or pillows. Some were absolutely rectangular, while others approached perfect squares. Valentine concluded that the stones of the Bimini Road were the remnants of a megalithic site similar in many ways to Stonehenge. In the ensuing years, Valentine and his colleagues continued their studies at the site and located others in close proximity which seemed to reinforce the importance of Bimini. However, all of these expeditions were basically concerned with the same question. Were the features of the road man-made or a naturally occurring formation of beach rock? Were their origins archaeological or geological? Up until that time, the findings had proved ambiguous and inconclusive. While Valentine and others wrestled with this problem in the field, 1,000 miles away in the American heartland, a professor of English classical literature with a military background and a passion for Atlantean studies was coming to some conclusions of his own. 6 years after his original discovery at Bimini, Dr. J. Manson Valentine, veteran in the race for Atlantis, passed the torch to Dr. David Zink.
10 expeditions out there led me to believe that it was an archaeological site, contrary to establishment opinions. In 1973, I sailed my yacht Mackay II out of Galveston to the Bahamas, and we began working on the project. What we were looking at was a reverse J shape of large rectangular and square stones which weighed up to 12 tons. Initially it looked perhaps like a harbor, but our basic question was coping with the establishment view that it was a natural formation of beach rock.
Zink led a total of 10 expeditions to the road site between 1974 and 1980. Inspired by the works of Plato, Cayce, Valentine, and others, he tackled the enigma of the road from every possible angle.
The most sophisticated thing we did was to core the blocks on into the seafloor and do nuclear activation analysis. We found, as a result, that the trace elements were quite different from the blocks and the seafloor, so that obviously had not been formed in sight.
Due to Dr. Zink's extensive work, the possibility of a sunken megalithic site in Bahamian waters began to gain credence and acceptability in many circles. His findings were published in the book, The Stones of Atlantis. He received many accolades and much interest from organizations such as the New York Explorers Club and the Cousteau Foundation, as well as a great deal of world media and public attention. But the most important result of his work at the site was the discovery of a number of man-made artifacts of unknown origin.
We found a stylized marble head, which in profile suggests an animal. We found a tongue and groove building block, evidently cast in a mold. We found 5 artifacts, but no ancient culture that can be documented. Since it related to no known pre-Columbian culture, it must have had something to do with a culture that we don't know anything about. Perhaps Casey was right. It perhaps was an outpost of Atlantis. It is at least 6,000 years old or more, so that takes it back of conventional Mesoamerican sites.
Despite Dr. Zink's tireless, dedicated, and exhaustive efforts at the Bimini Road site, field work languished during the early 1980s due to the inevitable lack of funds and equipment required to take it that one step further. For a number of years, the road and whatever secrets it still had to offer was returned to the creatures who had never questioned its meaning or significance, but had simply lived out their lives amidst the timeless, crystal-clear, sunlit beauty of the place. As for human interest, the site became merely a novel side trip for the ever-increasing numbers of vacationing scuba divers visiting the Bimini area. From time to time, sensational but mostly unsubstantiated claims of new discoveries around Bimini surfaced. They ranged from grotto-like caverns carved by mysterious means through the living rock, to strange offshore columns which glowed with a luminous light and emitted radioactivity. For the serious researcher, the daunting task of verifying the facts and debunking the fiction lay ahead. As in any research, there are some skeptics who are firmly opposed to even considering the evidence, and there are some believers who don't seem to need any. The latter was the case with what was alleged by some to be a collection of toppled pillars lying in shallow water a few miles southwest of the road site. They are obviously man-formed, are of uniform size, lie in rows on the seafloor, and appear to consist of material suitable for construction purposes. But the most cursory investigation does not suggest architecture or the fallen pillars of the Atlantean Hall of Records, but some wrecked ship's cargo, probably cement or lime, hardened in the barrels which have long since decayed. As each false lead is followed and discounted, the trail becomes clearer for a new wave of searchers committed to the hunt for Atlantis. Since the mid-80s, various groups have been returning to Bimini to continue the search for remnants of Atlantis. Most active have been the Florida-based Gaia Foundation and California's the Atlantis Organization. For the most part self-financed, their field sessions are short but intensive. Conveniently headquartered at South Bimini's Bimini Reef Club, the expedition members prepare for operations. From all walks of life, their common bond is a passionate belief in the existence of Atlantis. Their team consists of school teachers, scientists, and surveyors.
One of the things which has motivated my life is understanding why things happen. I've always had a deep desire to try to understand matter at a deep level, to understand the laws of physics and the laws of the universe, which motivated me to go into physics in the first place. One of the curious things about Bimini, besides the structures at the Bimini Road site underwater, are the mounds, which are seen above ground. They're strange shapes that look from the air like animals or man-made structures. They probably come from a more recent civilization, but they may have been built upon earlier civilizations.
Utilizing infrared photography undertaken by Kentucky land surveyor Raymond Lee, the mound figures become strikingly clear. Their most likely origin is with the Shark and Cat clans of the Yuchi Indians, but it is the more ancient remains and clues that may lie buried beneath them that interest the expedition members. To reach the mound sites safely requires local skills and knowledge of the area. The mangrove swamps are a low-tide labyrinth of tortuous turns and dead ends. Carrying all the equipment that they will require to undertake their various surveys, members of the Gaia Project, Dr. Joan Hanley, Dr. Claude Swanson, and research assistant Donnie Fields face a grueling trek through the tangled undergrowth. Due to the ravages of a recent hurricane, the survey markers placed by a previous expedition have been destroyed, and upon reaching the mounds, a conference is convened to discuss the plan of attack.
Approximately right there, where are some of the features that you would like to look at today?
Okay, well, as you know, last year we came here with the ground-penetrating radar system and laid out about 25 transects where we cleared some paths and made radar surveys over a grid in the mound. And we have some points where we saw anomalies last year.
With new markers in place, Dr. Swanson commences the survey with technology of his own design.
This device is called the Passive Anomaly Detector. It's an experimental system, still under development. This device measures the vertical electric and magnetic fields around the Earth. If we go over a building or some other submerged structure, it'll show a change in the frequency over the building structure. By making a two-dimensional pattern over that submerged structure, we can see the shape of the outline of the walls or of the building.
While the electronic testing continues, other expedition members utilize more conventional methods.
Finding a source of fresh water in the middle of the rectangular-shaped effigy mound here on Bimini gives us one supporting clue to the idea that it may have been man-made rather than a nature formation. All right, Donnie, there's water down there. I can see it. Oh, boy, give me a turn here. Maybe we can raise it up. Is that enough?
No, one more. This is a different material. This all has organic matter in it here, but yet we have the oolitic sand right here. You can feel the different coarseness of it.
Oh, yeah.
See?
All right.
References to fresh water permeate the entire Atlantis story. Plato made specific reference to hot springs and fountains of fresh water flowing in abundance throughout Atlantis. During the 1920s, Edgar Cayce predicted that a large complex of healing springs would be discovered on Bimini, which would have a direct connection to Atlantis. Even in historical times, Bimini has had the reputation as the possible location for the fabled Fountain of Youth. Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon so fervently believed in the Indian legend of Bimini's healing waters that he spent a fortune in gold trying to find it. Despite visiting every large or important island in the Bahamas, he somehow managed to miss the two tiny islands of Bimini. The fact that various strains of orchids, bromeliads, and other plant species requiring fresh water flourish amidst the saltwater mangroves of the mounds is in itself an anomaly. To some, the healing springs of Edgar Cayce and Ponce de Leon's lost Fountain of Youth have already been found on Bimini. Claims are made as to their regenerative properties, resulting in their becoming a veritable tourist attraction.
The reason I wanted to return to the research on Bimini is that after studying all that I could find written by experts in the field, I felt they had drawn their conclusions prematurely, that with the advent of new technology, Bimini deserved another look. The reason we decided to have a geologist come back to the Bimini Road and take more coring samples is that we wanted to see for ourselves actual cores taken from the rocks.
find it?
With the assistance of Dr. Swanson, Florida geologist Bill Raymond prepares to take a series of core samples from the Bimini Road site.
I'll go down and mark a stone to drill on, and then I'd like to ask you to drill and make a coring in the center of the stone. How far down do you think would be good to go today for a coring sample?
I think we need to go about 3 feet to get through that stone.
How long do you think it'll take to drill down to that depth?
A couple hours.
A couple hours, okay.
Although previous expeditions have undertaken coring operations on the road, their findings were focused on a number of specific areas of the site. Aided by his son Donovan, Bill Raymond faces many hours of heavy and strenuous labor. What the research team hopes the coring analysis will show is that the different layers of stones will have markedly contrasting characteristics. Should this prove to be the case, it would indicate that the stones had been placed on top of each other by other than natural means. If the stones are the same, it would suggest a geological formation. Observing the work from the sidelines, expedition members look on with anticipation, monitoring the drill's slow but steady progress towards the hoped-for conclusion. As Bill Raymond inspects the cut, his son Donovan keeps the heavy piece of machinery cutting at a straight angle by continuously kicking. A jammed coring bit at this stage of the game would cause hours of delay. More than 5 hours have elapsed by the time the coring equipment reaches its depth limit, deep below the surface of the Bimini Road. Extracting the sample is a critical process. A mishap now could result in the loss of the entire day's effort. Fatigue has set in and shows in the movements of the divers. For the first time in a millennium, this portion of the Bimini Road will be above the ocean's surface, once more in the world of air and sunlight. Specializing in underwater geology, Bill Raymond must first take back to his lab the core samples for a detailed analysis before he can make a determination as to their origin. To preserve the integrity of the core, it must be kept in its original configuration.
Some people have claimed that any archaeological sites found in the Bimini area are evidence of Atlantis having been here. I can't really say anything about Atlantis in Bimini. It's a possibility. What I will say about Atlantis is that if it did exist, I personally believe it would have been pushed under the Caribbean plate. Atlantis was supposedly located in the Atlantic, and the Atlantic plate is colliding with the Caribbean plate, and anything as old as Atlantis could very well have been pushed under the Caribbean plate and may never be found.
Developed by Dr. Harold Edgerton of MIT, side-scan sonar retrieves a three-dimensional image of the sea floor by utilizing sound instead of light. Consisting of a towed sonar fish connected to an onboard monitor, this technology has now become a standard tool in many areas of oceanographic research, as it allows large areas to be thoroughly surveyed in a relatively short time. By keeping a careful record of their course, the locations of interesting features are recorded.
4831, 1535.
4838, 1535.
Okay, now where do you want to go on the west? To 1500?
Yes, go due east to 1500.
Mark. 4859, 1532. Mark. 4840. 1530.
That was 277.
Here's 273. We've got hard stuff here, soft pockets there. There's a little pattern there for you.
A constant watch is kept on the side scan readout. Satisfied that the entire survey area has been completely covered, the side scan fish is retrieved, and now the task of deciphering the data commences. Expedition members, including the Atlantis organization's Tom Vanderveer and founder Bill Donato, review the record to make a determination as to which anomalies and features warrant further investigation.
structures, whatever.
Now here's some other features right in here too. Look at these. See how these little striations down through here? When we dive these, we'll have to document these photographically too.
The side scan record has provided a number of promising targets. By means of surface towing, the shallower sites can be checked visually. They're searching for the subtlest of signs. A straight line, an unusual pattern, a slight change in the strata of the seafloor. No possibility, however faint, can be ignored. In areas to the northwest of Bimini, such as Gun Cay, Cat Cay, and Turtle Rock, the bottom strata closely resembles that of the Bimini Road site. The underwater features include different types of a lithic material, megalithic blocks, what appear to be cut and worked stones, and what may be the remains of pavement, monolithic-type structures and features resembling hexagonal plates. In order to verify the possible similarities and connections between these sites, comparative analysis must be undertaken. Segments of stone from a wide area are retrieved by Dr. Claude Swanson. They will be submitted to a range of tests that the expedition members hope will point to a common origin. So often the survey areas which seemed so promising on the side scan record appear as a featureless wasteland to the naked eye. If the estimates of the antiquity of Atlantis' demise are correct, then any remaining artifact material would be shrouded beneath centuries of marine growth and incrustation. Despite the aid of the most sophisticated technologies, it is like searching for the proverbial needle in a haystack of cosmic proportions. The sea seems unwilling at times to give up her secrets, but on this occasion some evidence of man's handiwork is found, though its age, origin, or purpose is not immediately evident. Could this possibly be a link to some long ago lost land? The artifact is photographed in its original location, prior to being lifted from its resting place. Nearby, further artifacts that unmistakably bear the mark of men are found. The area is rich in man-made materials. A large number of what appear to be identically constructed roof tiles are scattered about the site. Only careful study and analysis will date them to their rightful place in history.
Yesterday we came across a little bit unusual features which turned up on the sonar of the boat of the person we were with. Some things which we didn't expect. We found some modern artifacts, but nothing really ancient. I would like to investigate in the future some other areas that are in the Bahamas. It will probably take a lot of money to do really thorough research, but we're pretty dedicated. We've come here for several years and we intend on coming back.
During the 1970s, the area surrounding the tiny Bahamian island of Walker's Cay was the center of an intense survey undertaken by the U.S. Defense Mapping Agency. That this idyllic backwater would become the focus of a renewed hunt for Atlantis could not be foreseen. But reports of strange, inexplicable structures on the sea floor near Walker's prompted veteran Atlantis hunter Dr. David Zink, after a 13-year hiatus, to return once more to his fieldwork in the Bahamas. After one failed attempt to reach the site in 1980, Zink has chosen to base his operation at the Walker's Cay Resort, a mere 30 nautical miles from his prime target. Zink and his crew face a homecoming of sorts, considering the years spent in Bahamian waters during the exhaustive study of the Bimini Road site. Though isolated at the very end of the Bahama chain, Walker's Cay provides the ideal location for an undersea and aerial investigation of the report.
I'm very excited to be once again on the search for Atlantis. This particular project goes back to the mid-70s with that Defense Mapping Agency photo. Various other government agencies did tracked this course, and it was quite real. I had waited about 5 years to get adequate support to get out here for 1980. I had a very professional team in Fort Lauderdale waiting to come out here. Our spotter plane found the boat from Nassau, a treasure hunter's boat, with a .50 caliber gun, machine gun, on deck over the site. We also then had a hurricane develop through the Keys, and we also had a cold front coming down, so in all ways we had to abort.
Since obtaining the original photograph, technology, particularly satellite-generated photography and mapping, has progressed by leaps and bounds. Dr. Zink has prevailed upon the EOSat company, a leader in the field of Earth photography, to provide him with the very latest, most detailed photographs of the area in question. The satellite image not only confirms the existence and position of the original target, but shows a similarly shaped but much larger feature closer and to the south of Walker's Cay. With expedition pilot Neil Watson at the controls, Zink's first order of business is to visually confirm both targets from the air and record their position exactly. Utilizing a state-of-the-art micrologic global positioning system, or GPS, the exact course, speed, and position of the aircraft can be monitored. Once over the site, its precise coordinates will be entered. As the photograph shows, the target is relatively small and indistinct. After a number of circuits, it is sighted, partially covered with sand and obscured by the sun's reflection on the choppy sea, but there nonetheless. Zink and Watson fly on to the second target. The EOSat photograph had clearly shown what appeared to be a huge L-shaped feature some 20 miles south of Walker's Cay, exactly where it should be. The site comes into view, and truly immense it is, perhaps 50 times larger than the Bimini Road. If this were to prove to be the remains of some man-made structure, what could it possibly have been? With 5 days scheduled to investigate both sites, Zink makes the decision to locate and dive the larger one the following morning.
I'm very excited about our present objectives, and I say that in a plural sense because the target that we'll probably first look at is more dramatic than anything that I've seen in the Bahamas. Overall, the meaning of these two possibilities may be that we have a very large complex here. It may be that we have something that will, in effect, reinforce Bimini. At any rate, these are megalithic size structures.
The 2-hour voyage to the site seems much longer through the choppy seas. This veteran of the Bimini Road is on the hunt again, and his eagerness is infectious. First in the water and always the last out, Dr. Zink insists on being towed over the search area, despite the worsening conditions. The roughening seas make towing arduous and difficult, and the increasing wave action severely diminishes the underwater visibility, lowering the odds of finding the target. As the weather continues to deteriorate, Zink, though reluctant, is forced to leave the water. One can only speculate on the thoughts that are going through his mind as the crew is forced to run for the shelter of Walker's Cay. A deep, low-pressure system establishes itself across the Bahama Bank. The expedition is stalled in Walker's for 3 full days.
The site that we're going to tomorrow is, first of all, in the original aerial photo from the Defense Mapping Agency, it was about 510 feet by 380 feet on a right angle. It apparently is a masonry wall. Of course, in the Bahamas, the sand shifts and sand levels change.
With time running out, all efforts are concentrated on the original site. With data from the Defense Mapping Agency and coordinates recorded during the GPS flyovers, the course is calculated and followed. Once at the search area, the drudgery of surface towing begins in earnest. By taking only the briefest of breaks throughout the long day, the area is covered systematically in a crisscross pattern, but nothing resembling the wall is sighted. As a last resort, Dr. Zink orders the plane out from Walker's Cay. The plan being to locate the site from the air and guide the search vessel to it. After a few passes, the elusive anomaly is spotted in the center of the survey area. Zink has the boat moved quickly over the target, and almost before the anchor hits bottom, he's down the line, hopeful of a rendezvous that has been 20 years in the making. Without a doubt, the feature is unusual, almost unnatural in appearance. It is seemingly carved into the living rock and sculpted from the stones of the seafloor. But to the trained eye, it soon becomes apparent that it is geological rather than archaeological. Despite cut and broken features that are reminiscent of those to be found in the Bimini area, 140 miles to the southwest, this site does not bear witness to the intervention of man, but rather to the violent upheavals of nature. This is evidenced by fissures, cracks, and crevices that radiate out from a central point like spokes of a wheel or the filaments of a tangled web spreading out across the sea floor. Stark and sterile formations of coral surround the site, scattered and discarded like the blocks in some wild child's game. To Zink and his crew, this is no game. There is no room for despair or disappointment, only the knowledge that another lead has been followed to its ultimate end, reducing the lengthy litany of reports and rumors by just one more, and allowing the searchers a clearer way in their quest for lost Atlantis. It is by no means the hoped-for triumphant return to Walker's Cay, but neither is it a failure. For one more mystery of the Bahama Banks has once and for all been put to rest through the tenacious dedication and the unshaken belief of one man.
I believe that Atlantis did exist. As in any ocean-related endeavor, one faces the fickle nature of the elements, the constraints of time, limited funding, manpower, and equipment. There are times when one may become discouraged. It's as if there seems to be a conspiracy of forces working against you. But through it all, the passion and belief survives and is strengthened.
What Dr. Zink and others committed to this search are striving for is the tangible proof of a civilization and culture lost to the memories of modern man. The vestige of an empire older than the oldest shipwreck yet explored or Egyptian tomb cleared of the dust of ages. Through dedication and research, the proof will come, and it will shake the very foundations of establishment thought. Dr. Zink and others will continue this work, for by decoding the ancient messages of the Atlantean age, they are convinced that we will learn more of the future and follies of our own civilization, knowing finally that our own history is but a breath upon the pane of time.